Yeah, I definitely do. And I think that part of that was the uncovering of the awfulness of the whole, like the mother and baby homes and the
Hmm.
Magdalene laundries and stuff like that. I think that the number of, because like I said earlier, every family in Ireland was really affected in some way by that. I think that a lot of people actually realised the extent to which women had been dreadfully treated,
Hmm.
um, and and want to make restitution. I honestly do believe that. You know, I talk about the last person that I canvassed in Donegal before repeal, who was this old fella. He must have been well into his 70s. Came to the door actually in Shag Gillespie's hometown in Killigordon, and he had said that he didn't know whether he was going to vote or not. And I said, why would you not vote? And he said, because I sort of think it's really up to you women. You know, like you're the ones who've been given such a hard time here, you know, by the church and the government and all, and it's probably up to you. And I was saying, yeah, but like, you know, we need everybody to vote who believes that. And I was like, so if you did vote, you'd be voting yes then, because I thought that was
Hmm.
the implication of what he was saying. And he says, well, I don't really know what way I should vote either, and that's another reason why I'm not voting. And I said, but you said, you know,
Yeah.
like that you thought that women were treated badly, and he goes, yeah. He says, I know. He says, I know that if I do vote, that I have to vote yes, because really, you know, really the women deserve it, don't they? The women deserve to make up their own minds, because when we were trying to make it up for them, we weren't doing a very good job. And I just kind of thought, and I came away like almost in tears, because I just thought, fuck, that's absolutely right. And I see with my own brothers, like I only have four now, but I used to have five brothers who are all older than me, and would be much more like, practicing Catholics, and really much more conservative. And um, and it was just really interesting to see how all of them over the last number of years have started to be very open about the fact that, for example, my mother was married when she became pregnant, which was a family secret that we were not allowed under any circumstances
Oh,
to ever discuss.
how dare
Um,
she?
but she almost ended up in a mother and baby home. I mean, she came that close to being in a mother and baby home.
Hmm.
And my eldest brother was probably the most conservative of the lot of us, being like literally saying, I could have been born in Bessborough, where there was a seventy
True.
percent
Yeah.
a 70% infant mortality rate, and him actually recognizing that. And then, so like even the most conservative people that I can think of actually, like, just realizing a level of injustice that there
Hmm.
was. And I think if you recognize that, then you are actually starting to kind of see, do you know what I mean, like women as human beings and as people, the sort of the
It
same as.
took grave systemic human rights violation for the men of Ireland to finally see us as human beings, is basically the conclusion. This is
Well,
grim.
I think for them to say it out loud, I
Yeah.
mean, I stand up a bit, a fair bit for the men of Ireland in relation to all that. Because, so first of all, when I said my mother came that close to mother baby home, it's because my father wasn't being allowed to marry her. I mean, he wanted to marry her. They were madly in love. They wanted to get married. But the parish priest was telling my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, that my mother was a scandal, and that if they let her get married and kind of get away with it, that would be bad, like, bad example. So that when they talk about scandal, when the Catholic Church
So
says
she
that's a
had to be
scandal,
punished.
she'd have to
That's
be punished. So like, had she ended up in a mother and baby home, people would be sort of saying, "Well, where are the men? Where are the men?" The men were fucking breaking down my father was going around every single day begging her father to give them permission to get married. While her mother was listening to the parish priest and saying, no, we can't let them have permission to get married. Um, I also, when contraception was illegal in the south of Ireland, the south of Ireland had the highest vasectomy rates in Europe.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So, that was like the men stepping up, so I think that the, and men in the Republic of Ireland, well, probably in the north as well, if, um, but we know, like, we have very clear figures about for the south of Ireland, like, had mental health, like a psychiatric illness rate, and I mean, you know, to the level of being hospitalized, which was absolutely like rocketing. So the idea that the men didn't in any way benefit from what was going on, quite the opposite. And I think that, like, I know that if my parents had been allowed to get married, that my father probably would have ended up being one of those men. And so, like, a lot of the time when people talk about, you know, but what about the men who got those women pregnant, and there's just this assumption that they all just, you know,
setback,
or did a runner. I mean, there was this expression like, you know, he did a runner, you know, I told him I was pregnant and he did a runner. I'm not saying that they didn't exist, right? They did. But there was also, like, so an awful lot of those men who ended up dying in psychiatric hospitals, we don't know that some of them didn't end up like that precisely because, you know, the love of their life had been carted off,
and because they knew what was happening inside those walls. Well, they probably didn't know exactly. I'm not sure that. I think people had an idea, but they didn't know how bad. I don't think that
the fight to have real choices, for people to have real choices in their lives, is like the next kind of fight, and that's what I mean about. That's kind of a bit bigger. You know, it's a lot bigger because it's like the whole system. And climate change actually does mean, so like when you were saying what's the next, you know, fight, in terms of, you'd have to say climate change, but I happen to think that climate change can't be solved either unless the whole economic system is turned upside down. So whatever it is, you know, like, I think that's the only way to go.
With so many social justice causes. So you cannot just fight for abortion and just go home and just think your fight is over.
Because, like I said, it's only half the equation, and the other half like, it's gone the other way around now. You know, it used to be that, you know, like, it used to be that motherhood was something that was what's the word? Was valorized, you know. And like, so for example, you were allowed, if you were a single parent, the government provided benefits that allowed you to stay at home, look after your children until the youngest one was 18. They did not expect you to look for any kind of work or anything like that. They understood that bringing up children is a full-time job, and especially that teenagers in an area, you know, that's very deprived and where there's paramilitaries and everything, you know, looking after teenagers, really important, you know, that they know that there's somebody there when they come home and all that kind of thing. Now, I mean, once your youngest child is 3, you're supposed to start looking for a job. Like, there's no childcare, and yet you're supposed to start looking for a job, you know. And once the youngest child is 1, you're supposed to be like doing training and stuff like that to kind of prepare you to look for work when the youngest child is 3. I mean, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, I am the kind of person who, you know, I would go and, you know, I prefer to clean toilets than to have to stay at home and look after children. But that's me. Do you know?
It's your choice.
It's a choice. But, you know, that choice isn't there now for so many people, just so many. And in fact, actually, for the vast majority, unless you're part of, like, the elite, really, there's no way that anybody can stay at home now to look after their children. They have to go out and work. But, like, also the borders all around us, you know. So, like, once you're on this side of the river, once you come over to this side of the river, like, if the bridges went down, then the only way you'd have of getting out of Derry is to go to the south. There's no other way of doing it. So Derry's kind of specifically like that. But it's not that I think that Northern, I suppose that it is kind of too small. But it's not so much that, it's just about, like, that the only way that the kind of change that we need can happen is probably on an all Ireland kind of basis. And I always saw the hope was coming from the south, do you know? And I mean, it turned out to be true in relation to both abortion and LGBT rights. It, you know, the hope came from the south, and I've always thought that, like, the working class in the south is far larger than that in the north. All the movements in the south are far larger than in the north. And I've always thought it's more, you know, some huge social movement out there, like, spilling over here is far more likely than the other way around. Although we did have a bit of the other way around after the rugby rape trials. So yeah. Probably if I was honest, I'd have to say that it would have to be like a kind of a complete change, because the next real thing, I think, is trying to do something about, we've done something about abortion rights, but in terms of like reproductive justice, the right to choose, the choice, there's not much of a choice there really, like. Yeah. I think that actually an awful lot of people who have abortions at the minute have them because they have no choice. They're forced into having an abortion by the fact that they don't have a house or a decent place to bring, a place that they could bring up a child. I don't mean a house, but like a place to live.
Or a domestic abuse victim, or
whatever. I mean, so many issues like that. The fact that really so many people earn so little that it's impossible to think about how are they supposed to bring up a child. The fact that there's laws that say that, if you've already got two and you have a third, that the state won't help you in any way at all. There's just so much like economic injustice that, and I don't think any of that can be solved within the Northern Ireland state. And I suppose that's, like, if I was to be really honest, but it would probably like sound a bit too pat, I would think that that really the task for the next generation is to actually like turn the whole thing upside down and
overthrow
the government, have a revolution, get rid of partition. I think it already has, actually, in terms of the women's movement. Because so first of all, you have to remember that once the feminist websites got going, very quickly the South started to seize every single pill that was coming into the South. So for the best part of 10 years or so, all the abortion pills on the island of Ireland came through the North. So there had to be like a network set up, kind of across the 32 counties. So it was an all Ireland venture, really, like I say, maybe not for 10 years, but for near enough. So that actually kind of started, I think, that whole all Ireland movement. And then we did people from the North went down south for appeal. So it was only natural and right, that the solidarity was kind of given back. But then remember, there was also we saw that solidarity not only in relation to abortion, but like straight after the rugby rape trial verdict, like those huge rallies that happened in the South, like they were, I don't know about you, but like I found those really uplifting, And Eamon at the time said that he saw them as an expression not for a united Ireland, but of a united Ireland.
Yeah.
And I think that was absolutely right. And we have actually seen those kinds of movements of a united Ireland before, like in relation to other things. Actually, it's true mainly in relation to kind of more Republican things, like say after, like during the H-Block campaigns or stuff like that. But from time to time, there's always been things happening, that actually like cross the border and that people north and south recognise as being the same issue. And certainly I think abortion was one of those, because I think we always understood, well, first of all, because the law came from before partition.
Yeah.
And then also because I think that most of the people who were involved in the struggle for abortion rights always understood that partition was part of the problem. Like when James Connolly said, partition would lead to a carnival of reaction, that we could see that, that's what had happened. So like even if you go back like to the first women's right to choose group in the South, the vast majority of people who were involved in that, well, actually no, that's a lie. Probably about half of the people who were involved in it were also involved in the H-Block campaign. Actually, there was a big divide in relation to that. Won't talk about it. I'm still kind of a little bit traumatized by it. But there was, that like understanding that actually, partition is part of the problem, and there was always kind of a north-south interface there in relation, you know what I mean, like a kind of an idea that we live in, we either stand together or whatever the expression is, or hang apart. You know, like if we didn't stand together, nothing would change.